Today we explore the question, does the spring need a spring game for the spring to be interesting? We'll talk about it next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into an Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more.
All right, welcome in to this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Harper of 1620 The Zone is with me. Connor, as you mentioned in the open, a question that I had not considered before, but heard on Monday. This actually came from some of our podcasting friends, Matt Schick and Nick Baugh. If we were on a panel, we might be discussing this. Was the spring at Nebraska this year less interesting for fans because Nebraska did not hold a traditional spring game? For me, the answer, it's no. But so I was surprised that the suggestion from both of them was yes, that the spring game entices fans to get more interested in spring practice because at the end, there's a game you watch. Kind of like you wouldn't be interested in fall practice if there weren't 12 games from the end of August until Black Friday.
Well, I think it's a combination of a couple different things. Okay, so we're all agreeing that we're all operating under the premise that people were less interested in the spring this year.
They're less interested. Yeah, less interested in this. Well, there wasn't really a spring game yet. Yeah, right. We're going to say people were less interested in the spring, perhaps even significantly less interested in the first 14 practices.
Yeah.
And did that have something to do with the fact that there was no game at the end?
I think there's something to that. You're not building toward anything. You can't, like, all the storylines that I think are, mildly important that pop out during spring, or questions that you want answered or on the path to being answered. Like, you can actually see that in practice, like in motion, in function, until the fall. By that time, you forget about all your questions that you had going into the spring, of course, but they're probably the same ones that you're going to bring up. And then I think most of it is probably just a waning interest in the day-to-day of the program in general. I mean, I've felt that over a long. Yeah, I know. I know this is a big topic. But is interest in Nebraska football fading, or has apathy finally set in? Nebraska's won one single bowl game in as weird as we talked about it leading up to the bowl game. Hey, Nebraska hasn't won a bowl game in almost 10 years since the Foster Farms Bowl in 2015. It doesn't sound much better when you say they've only won one bowl game in the last 10 years now. So, like, I think they really, fans want to see
a little bit better.
Fans want to see it pop, and they want to see it be competitive, and probably over a long period of time. This is now a long rut that Nebraska is in for. They haven't won enough games, so I think there's a lot of that's all coming to fruition. Plus the college football landscape, and it's just like, oh my God, there's so much going on. Can we just get ourselves to fall? Because I still like the games. I still watch the games, and I'm like, wow, this is what I love. I love watching Nebraska football play on Saturdays, but the rest of it is just kind of in one ear, out the other.
I think waning interest in spring football in general has a lot to do with what you got there at the very end of that point, in that there's so much stuff that's going on outside of the sport or outside of the actual football playing and practice that people are exhausted by the developments that are happening in court or with NIL and revenue sharing. And they know that if they tune in to hear about spring football, that it's inevitably going to turn into a conversation about big money and other stuff that a certain segment of the college football population does want to know about, but it's not like more than 50%. It's probably not more than 30%. When you could pay attention to spring football, and basically what you heard about, what you read about, what you saw was position battles, coaching adjustments, rising young players, the storylines behind the teams that came out of interview opportunities that don't really exist today. Today, even at Nebraska, where we, the media, have excellent access to the coaches and the players, all of the interviews are sterilized. They've turned into podium sessions. There are not as many opportunities for broadcasters and writers to sit down with coaches and players and ask a question and then a series of questions after that based on the answers that those individuals give. Now it's this guy over here needs to ask a question. This woman up here needs to ask a question. And there's the TV guy in the back, and there's just not flow to it. I mean, there's still information that comes out of it. So I'm going to be done here complaining about media access in Nebraska and the ways in which we get our information. But I do think that all of that plays into what we're seeing in the changes about the way that people consume content and the way that people get their information in spring football. I don't think, Connor, that there is less interest in Nebraska football in general. And I didn't intend for this to turn into that conversation, but I'm going to base that off like one very unscientific method, which is when I go to the ball field or the grocery store, do people want to talk to me about Nebraska football? Yes. Has that changed over the last 10 to 15 years? Not really. Like that's just, it's still there. I think sense that. And then two, yeah, I see the data. I've worked now for 15 years for companies that track that stuff. And there's a reason we cover Nebraska football like we do at The Athletic, and people are interested.
I think there's a varying level of fervor to it, though. Like, there's a different sort of passion. We talked about last year. Well, I guess it was when they wiped out the Tennessee game off the schedule in the future. Mm-hmm. It was like, I love games like that because I think they invigorate your fan base. I think they engage them in a way that you just don't see very much. I mean, I think you saw it for the Colorado game this year, and people were engaged and they went back and forth with Colorado fans, and that's a rivalry and all that stuff. But that was, I think that was a really engaging moment for Nebraska's fan base. And so we don't have, I mean, especially in the future when, maybe Nebraska is trying to get to the college football playoff, but they're also, lining up scheduled wins on their non-con schedule and stuff like that. I just feel like there's less of an edge to it these days. And then I'll throw one more thing in there as far as that's concerned. I think we like drama. I think we like when mildly controversial things happen, or somebody's mad at somebody, or somebody's not happy with what their job is. I think everything is pretty, not that there's not a healthy tension always over there in Nebraska football, but you never really hear about it. There's no, Matt Rule doesn't hate his boss or anything like that. So I like the most engaged, the most red hot times in Nebraska football that I can remember, as far as the fans and they're paying attention to the team in the day to day, was during the Bo era, because Bo was crazy and you never knew what he was going to do at any given moment. You
couldn't afford to turn away.
Right. Exactly. And we just we don't have that right now. And that's okay. That's probably more conducive to winning, but I do think people like the drama.
Fans would say that they don't want that, but then when it happens, they can't get enough of it. So just to finish this conversation, because I wanted this conversation, and it's fine where we went, but I wanted this conversation, or I intended it to originally to be about whether the lack of intrigue on Saturday at Memorial Stadium has anything to do with a perceived lack of interest overall in spring practice. And I'm not even sure that people were less interested in spring practice. In fact, from my vantage point, that's not the case. Like, I was just as engaged and interested in spring practice this year, and I think a lot of fans were, as in other years. The only time when a spring game for me really moves the meter up several notches.
Battle.
Right. 2024, you got a new quarterback coming in, Dylan Raiola, freshman. He's new on the scene, and he's the favorite to take over the starting role. 2018, you had a double whammy with a new coach in Scott Frost and a new quarterback in Adrian Martinez, another highly rated freshman. You go way back to 2005, Zach Taylor, JUCO kid coming in, expected to take over, new offense with Bill Callahan in his second year. Like, those are the kind of seasons, and those are few and far between. I mean, I just went back 20 years of spring games. I picked out 3. There's a couple others where you've had a quarterback battle. In those years, like, I've needed a spring game. The spring game has gone and it's upped it several notches. But like, if there had been a red-white game this year with Dylan playing and Jalen Gramstad and Emmett Johnson and Dane Key, like, for me, that wouldn't have really done very much to add to spring practice. Like, I want the information that comes out of the actual practices before the spring game, because that tells me stuff about the team in the fall that's coming. The spring game really does it. Like, the spring game for me, I get out there and I watch one quarter and then I'm like, can we go home? Because this is not what we're going to see in August and September.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm out of touch. I could very well be out of touch. I'm just
I think you nailed it. I mean, just think back to, like, you know, can you remember these spring game moments from the last 20 years outside of the ones that you just mentioned where you were really paying attention because of a quarterback battle or something like that, outside of, like, the Jack Hoffman run or Bo holding up a cat or something like that, or the game getting canceled because of a tornado threat. I like that. I like those.
No, it's usually like a 4th string tight end who had a big day, and then, well, he'd go in the portal in today's world, but, you know, went back and played on the scout team in the times when we saw that.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. Little portal news. Yesterday, we mentioned it at the end of yesterday's show. A couple of the names trickled out there yesterday. We'll discuss that next on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. But first, the NBA playoffs are indeed here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if that bet wins. FanDuel makes it easy on you, man. You check out an NBA playoff game, and it's not just that game. You're talking about series-long bets or even postseason-long bets. Before the game, you have a feeling about which way it's going to go, or even during the game. In the NBA, you see runs of comebacks of 25 and 30 points sometimes. If you have an inkling, you can bet on that during the game. 3-pointers, assists, steals, player props, things like that. FanDuel's got it all for you before or during the actual game. You could run a same game parlay as well and get yourself going that way. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today with FanDuel. All right, welcome back. Connor, Harper, Mitch Sherman here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. We mentioned a couple names might trickle out there from the transfer portal on Monday, and a couple names did indeed. Nico Ottomanelli is one of them.
I'm very sad about this. I think
why are you sad about this?
I think if you really think about it, you know why. I needed him to kick a field goal on big noon kickoff. On a big noon game with Gus.
We already have John Hull.
But think about what fun he could have had, may have at some other school that Nico lands at. Think about the fun that Gus could have with Nico Ottomanelli's name.
Yeah, he would have a lot of fun with it. That's true. More fun than what he had with John Hull. I mean, have we heard him do a Tristan Alvano yet?
He might have in 2023. I don't know. Nebraska didn't play as much on Big Noon in 23. I don't think he had a big Alvano moment. There's not a burning love affair between Gus Johnson and Tristan Alvano.
No, I gotta see the next time Gus does a game, because he saw him a couple times this year at basketball games, and he'll like go across the court and like shake hands with the players and like dap them up and stuff like that before the games. I imagine he would try to do that with John Hull before the first Nebraska game he does next year.
Hull. Yeah. So John Hull, let's talk about the kid. Well, first of all, you had Nico Ottomanelli and then Grant Seagren. We'll talk about the kicker first. The more consequential portal entry is Grant Seagren, the offensive tackle. But on the kicking front, Nebraska is not going to keep 3 kickers traditionally moving into the 105 era. Now, that's a year or 2 down the road, or 3, likely, based on things that are happening in court that we don't have answers to yet at this point as we go into May. But their 2 kickers is going to be standard. And Nico at this point sees himself, I think, or Nebraska coaches, he doesn't see himself, but I think the Nebraska coaches see him as number 3. So he's the odd man out. Tristan Alvano participated in the kicking challenge along with Ottomanelli and Brett Maher, Nebraska's former star kicker and now kickers coach, on Saturday at the Husker games. And Alvano, I thought, looked like his leg was back. It was accurate. And again, this is like in warm-ups. So it's a bit of a
who said we don't get anything? Who said we don't get anything at a spring ball? We watched Tristan Alvano be back. That's what I'm talking about.
He was back. He was back, baby, in warm-ups. So I because it was an injury and he had great distance. Like, it looked like the Tristan Alvano that I think everyone expected back when he came from Omaha West Side to Nebraska. And we definitely saw some flashes in his freshman year of 23 before he got hurt. Like, if that's the guy out there, then there's a race between John Hull and Tristan Alvano in the fall, and that leaves Ottomanelli to find another school.
Yeah, they should have had. We should dub over Gus Johnson doing the 2022 state championship game between West Side and Bellevue West, right?
That was Gretna.
Gretna, yeah. He kicked the field goal, and then he got the scholarship offer from Mickey Joseph like right afterwards. Yeah, that was what was it, like a 49-yarder? Just banged it right through
on a windy, cold night at Memorial Stadium.
Yeah. Should we put Gus Johnson on the Alfano?
Yeah, for sure. So you're going to have a kicking duel in August, which I'm just getting revved up for right now as I speak about it, with Mike Eckler presiding over such battle and Maher. But Nebraska will hope to go into Arrowhead Stadium on August 28th with a weapon at the kicker spot. And Alvano and Hull are the candidates. Ottomanelli is on the way out. So there's another spot freed up on the Nebraska roster. Grant Seagren.
Yeah, the Seagren one was kind of interesting, right? I think he was kind of in the mix. Probably not to start, but in the twos range. But obviously Nebraska went out and got a tackle in the transfer portal, which kind of bumped everybody down. You're still wondering about the health of guys like Teddy Prohaska and Turner Corcoran, and you have Tyler Kanak there. But Seagren was the guy who played for Nebraska a little bit last year. And so, I think that was a nice sort of safety net to have. Not like a giant loss by any means, but he was certainly closer to playing time than, a third string kicker would be. Although I guess we have seen the life of a third string kicker at Nebraska. It's been closer to playing time than most third string kickers. But anyway,
there have been 6th and 7th string kickers that have gotten action at Nebraska.
Yeah.
So Seagren was not in uniform, even the practice uniform. He wasn't there, to my knowledge, on Saturday at the Husker games, and he is a guy that I caught wind at that event could be going in the portal. It's a little bit interesting. This one's a little bit tricky. Like, there have been signals sent from Matt Rule about Grant Seagren. He talked about him in the spring and said, I believe it was Rule. This might have been from a Holgerson interview, but I think it was Rule who said that Grant Seagren is a guy that when he steps up and believes that he can be a Big Ten caliber offensive tackle, then he's ready and he will be that player. So like get out of the walk-on mentality I'll check and find that interview and report back tomorrow on who said it. I think it was the head coach.
Yeah.
So they were waiting, like they wanted something from him. They had seen it for a couple of years. He was in his third. This would have been his third year in the program. So I think that's disappointing. That qualifies as disappointing. Probably the biggest portal disappointment of the spring for Nebraska. Of course, with the ones this spring, you had Elijah Pritchett at left tackle, Tyler Kanak at right tackle, and then Seagren was with the twos. Nebraska will get Gunnar Gatula back from injury this summer. Teddy Prohaska, Turner Corcoran are question marks. I think if Teddy Prohaska becomes somebody that Nebraska can rely on as a backup and a leader in that room, and I don't say that backup word, I don't say that lightly, but I think I say that more because I believe if you put him out there for 60 reps week after week, I just don't know if he's going to hold up.
Yep.
But if he can be somebody who helps the team and plays and is a rotational piece, that might be the best role. So they're a little thin on offensive tackles who are in line to start. And Seagren is probably another guy, if the path continued the way that it was, who was not the best starting option, but you have to have two. And right now I would say it looks like Pritchett and then Kanak or Gatula. Gatula has the starting experience. Knack was the guy who was doing it in the spring this year. And then they continue to bring along young linemen like Grant Bricks and like Preston Talamua, who was swinging between guard and tackle this.
So I think
spring.
the hope is there. You want to have four, right? And at least starting two that you feel really good about, and I feel like Nebraska is on the path there. There's the injury guys category. Gatula will come back in and be a guy that you could trust right away. I think what you said about Prohaska is good. I think that's a good expectation for him. And then I think they view Corcoran as a guy who could do a little bit of everything. He's played a lot along the offensive line. Maybe he could even play some guard. And so you're asking probably Bricks or Taumua to come up a little bit, and one of them is going to be probably on the twos, and that's not a bad thing for guys who are in their redshirt freshman year, and it's maybe time to elevate those guys a little bit. So yeah, an interesting loss. I think it kind of bumps everybody up a little bit. Was a nice safety net to have, but not like earth shattering.
If you'd have said to me in the middle of the spring that Grant Seagren could end up starting a game or two in the fall, I would have said, that's
I'd be
okay.
like, sure.
That I could see that happening. And I think there's a chance that he's going to end up like, don't just think, FCS for this guy because he came from Oakland, Nebraska as a walk-on. Like he's built like a players who have scholarships in this program, 6'6", 305. You could see him at a Power 4 program. So keep an eye on that if you please. When we come back, we're going to talk a little Nebraska baseball. Huskers return to the diamond tonight and finish up the show with by going around the horn a bit. That is next. All right, first, there is nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute Major League Baseball showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup. But finding great seats at a great price, that's kind of a challenge. Well, until Game Time came on the scene. Game Time makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever because prices drop as the event gets closer. And with Game Time's all-in pricing, you see the total cost up front. There are no surprise fees at checkout. They've got last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% on those last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Grab a last-minute seat, save big with the Zone deals. You got peace of mind. View your seat, get the view from the seat before you buy. And there's the lowest price guarantee. All of it creates total confidence for you as the ticket holder. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, welcome back. Final segment of the Tuesday episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you. Let's check in on Nebraska baseball. The Huskers over the weekend took 2 of 3 at Maryland. That was much needed. They are 9-12. Nebraska is in Big Ten play with 3 weekends left, and those 3 weekends: Minnesota in Lincoln this upcoming Friday, the series starts, Michigan in Lincoln, and then Purdue on the road. So Nebraska must finish in the top 12 in the league to make the Big Ten tournament in May at Charles Schwab Field. Right now, Huskers are in a 4-way tie for 10th place with Michigan State, Northwestern, and Rutgers. So, wow, they're living on the edge.
Yeah. Yep. As they will be, but you're on the right path. If you continue to take series, and the good thing, we sort of laid it out. I think before last week, the schedule is kind of in your favor. You're playing either teams that are right around, where you are right now or below you. So you'd have a chance, win some series, stack some wins, and get hot. Gabe Swanson, who is about to turn into he's about to turn into Reggie
postseason Gabe.
Yeah.
Is this warm weather Gabe?
Yeah. It's
you saw him. He was the best player in the country in June last year.
Yeah. he's about to turn into Babe Ruth or something like that. So that's good. You got that on your side. I think we probably are close. We talk about this all season. Like, are you still going after like an at-large berth? Their RPI 69. Like, they're gonna struggle to get over 500. Like, you're not probably gonna be an at-large team at this point. It's weird how not that far away you are from that conversation, though. You could see the holes in the schedule, what they haven't done so far, to be like, dang, if we would have won those games, we would have had a chance. But nah, man, you got to make the Big Ten tournament, and then you got to try and win it if you want to get into the dance.
Yeah. So what it's done is it's taken these games like tonight. I'll be at Haymarket Park tonight, checking it out. My first visit of the year. Nebraska plays Kansas State. Huskers welcome the Wildcats from the Big 12, and then Creighton. Third game of the Creighton series. The rubber match is next Tuesday. Is that one in Omaha, Connor?
No, it's in Lincoln. 2 games in Lincoln this year.
Okay, so those games have become afterthoughts, and yeah, Nebraska will try to win them, but the games matter very little, if at all, for the Huskers' ability to get into the postseason. And you can say, all right, well, hey, the players are going to be competitive. They're still going to try to win. But what it does is it changes the strategy for Will Bolt, because you can't remove any of your firepower from the weekend to go out and win a Tuesday night game, which is kind of sad, because like, these are fun games, especially when you get into May, late April and May. These are fun games for the fans, but Nebraska's going to have to, you put your regular lineup and defensive positioning out there, but on the mound, if you want to get an inning out of a high-end pitcher, aside from like maybe your closer on a Tuesday night, which is fine, it gets him work before the weekend, you just have to be very conservative about it, because you can't take anything away from your ability to win a game on Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, it's tough. That's not a fun place to be, but it is the truth of where they're at right now. They have to win games in the weekend. The conference games are the only ones that matter. You get yourself into Omaha, and then you try and go from there. Although I do think they'll want to take the series with Creighton, just because of course, those teams don't necessarily like each other that much, and Creighton's pretty good right now. So if you could ding their RPI chances and anything like that, that'd be good. I'm excited for you to see the K-State tonight. That's a pretty solid team, and they'll be in a regional.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't mean to say that it takes away from any of Nebraska's motivation to win. They'll be as motivated to win tonight and next Tuesday as ever. It's just a strategy thing on the mound in particular. All right. So did you see this last item on Monday night?
So you tweeted about it last night. It's an interesting thought.
So one more thing before we go. Nebraska Volleyball debuted Danny Busboom Kelly on Saturday after the football scrimmage. This was the most interesting event athletically, I think, at Nebraska over the weekend. Huskers took 4 sets, played a 4-set match. It was predetermined against Kansas at the Bob Devaney Sports Center, which covers the top of John Cook Arena, and debuted the new head coach, some very intriguing freshmen. We got to see the new leadership of Nebraska's junior class without Lexi Rodriguez, no Merritt Beeson. Now this team belongs to the likes of Rebecca Alec, who's a senior, and then the star junior class of Bergen Riley, Harper Murray, and Andy Jackson. So Harper on X Monday night posted this: "I'd like to give my extra tickets for Saturday's match in Ord to kids who live near Ord and were unable to get tickets. I have 3 tickets available. I'd love for a family with little Husker fans to use the tickets. DM me. I'll review the messages with my mom, and she will reach out."
And then she figured out that nobody can actually DM her, so she was like, well, just reply to the tweet, and then we'll figure it out from there. Okay, I don't know how Twitter works anymore, which is very relatable, honestly, for people like me. I don't know how Twitter works either, so it's great.
So Nebraska's national championship contender. They're playing at this little high school in Ord against South Dakota State, and Harper Murray puts out this post. And I bring this up because anytime Harper Murray comes up, you find the trolls, and you can be jaded about this if you want. Last year at this time, she ran into trouble twice in the offseason. And when Nebraska went to Kearney for its spring match, Murray was along for the ride. She was suspended, but still practicing with the team after she had been arrested for DUI earlier in the offseason. And on the trip to Kearney, news broke that she had been caught shoplifting in Lincoln. So she was removed from the other players and basically just taken care of by the Nebraska staff. Did not attend the match in Kearney. When the Huskers got back to Lincoln the next night, she spent the night at the house of Lindsey Peterson, Nebraska's longtime ops director, because they didn't want to send Harper back to her own place of living. She needed to get back with her family in Michigan. Basically, they took her in her darkest time, and it is quite the interesting situation, quite the inspiring situation, I suppose you could say, to look at what she's doing a year later by reaching out to fans and bringing them into her world.
Well, I think it's been really cool to just kind of watch her grow. Like she's not, she knows that the trolls are going to come out or whatever, but she's super active on social media and engaging with fans. And there's a lot of fans of Harper Murray. So I think that part is really cool. And she's been more outward about that. And then I also think from a more closer to volleyball perspective, she, now that John Cook is gone, she feels this sort of responsibility and this kind of good weight on her shoulders to sort of, carry this forward. She would not have been in a good position, if John Cook walks away before last year, she's not in a good position, right? She's in a bad spot. So yeah, I think she's been, kind of hardened by it all. And it's definitely been cool to see her grow over the last year.
Yeah. And the best part with the Harper Murray story is that we get to watch her on this path for 2 more years before she graduates and probably heads off to the U.S. Olympic team after that. So, all right, something to keep an eye on this weekend. We will be back on Wednesday. Remember, our mailbag show is Friday. So if you've got mailbag questions about spring football, what comes next for Nebraska, anything else in Nebraska sports or whatever it might be, send those questions in. LockedOnNEB@gmail.com is the best way to get us for the mailbag. Thank you today for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast with Damian and Keith as they continue to go over the results of the draft from last weekend. As your favorite collegiate players get ready to make their debuts with new NFL franchises, You can find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.